Okay, that's it. Okay, go to you. Okay, Mr. Asad, you should wanted to take the attendance quickly before we go ahead.
Yeah, just they raise their hands and you can
Okay.
continue. I will just take the attendance in the background.
Okay, guys, you can go ahead now and raise your hands, and we'll go ahead and to look at the schedule for today. So this is our Slack schedule for today. This is week number 5. Okay, if you guys can see it over here, and we are on 23rd of October. Okay, and we will talk about threat data today, and we'll talk about rules and responsibilities for different team members of the IT security teams. Okay, so this is gonna be our topic for today, and then we're gonna, look at the lecture. We do a quick recap, try to connect between what we have studied in the first 4 weeks and what we're gonna, explore in this week. And then we're gonna go for lunch, and then after this you can come inshallah for the normal assignments or normal lab. So this is basically the schedule for today. If you guys wanted to look at the content for today, it's already here. Let me just go quickly to show you where it's exactly in the platform. So in the platform, you will find an intermediate level, which is basically we're starting a new course. The first 4 weeks was beginner level, which is this is how we introduce you to cybersecurity, what is cybersecurity is all about, how to do prevention, what kind of different techniques for preventions. The intermediate week is gonna be about another course. Let me show you. Okay, so today we talk about rules and responsibilities within our IT security teams. We'll talk about security control types, and again, we'll talk about different security control types, prevention controls, detection controls, and also correction controls. So this is we have already talked about before, but then we're just gonna go over it very quickly. Then we'll talk about a new topic called threat intelligence and how threat intelligence methodology and life cycle looks like, and what I'm gonna do with this threat intelligence, because threat intelligence means that you gather information and data about your adversary or about your attackers, and then later on you can use it for something called threat hunting or to better defend your system. So look at the threat intelligence cycles and threat intelligence sources. Where do you get this data from? So this is also important, how we look at the closed sources and open sources and all this stuff. So this is what we're gonna look at today also. And finally, we'll end up with something called indication of compromises. There's not much here about indication of compromises because we're gonna cover it also again in the next few days. So we're gonna just give you an introduction for indication of compromises. And later on this week, we'll cover it in more details. Okay, guys? So clear what we're gonna cover today?
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay, so let me just jump quickly and talk about what we have just finished last time we came here, or we talked about last time we came here. So let me just share my screen quickly. Okay, so what we have talked about last time we met here, that's the adversary or the attacker, they follow certain methodology to attack your system. Just give me 1 second, guys. Okay, so you guys can see my screen right now. So we talked last time about something called cyber kill chain. And I mentioned clearly that cyber kill chain is about how the adversary approach your network and how he can compromise your network, okay? And I said there is a certain methodology that most of the attacker they will follow. Sometimes they're saying it's a hacking methodology. Sometimes they call it kill chain, because the kill chain is coming from the military terminology of if someone is attacking a target. So they said, okay, you always need to do reconnaissance about the target. So you really need to understand what their defenses is, okay, what kind of systems they have, or what kind of military equipment they have. And then you start to do weaponizations. And this weaponization is basically, you try to select the weapon that you're gonna attack your target with. And that is, again, back to how the attacker will approach the target. So when sometimes they develop a malware specifically for the target, sometimes they really look for vulnerabilities in the target systems and they try to exploit it. And then once you have the weapons that you select for attacking the target, you go ahead and try to deliver this weapon to the target. And delivering the weapons means the threat vector. And this threat vector could be physically. So you can just give him an USB that's already have a malicious website, a malicious code, or maybe try to lure the target to access a certain website which is infected, or maybe you can phish him, or maybe you can social engineer him. So there's so many ways of delivery. Okay, so this is again a way over here to really reach the target networks and try to exploit it. And once the target run your code, or run your malicious files, it will be executed in his machines, and you will take an ownership of this machine, or maybe you compromise this machine, and you will be able to really have full control over the machine. And then later on, the attacker, as they always try to do something we call escalation of privilege. They want it to be like really, they will have better permission to do whatever they want in your machine, and later on to compromise more machines. So they wanted always to have escalated their privilege to be an administrator or to be a root user in the machines. And once he is a root user, he starts to install more tools in order to exploit more, to really get control over all your machines. So they install some application to discover your network. They can install some application to basically install password tools, so they can crack or find the hashes in your environment. Maybe also they sometimes use some of the already existed tools in your machine, like PowerShell. And that's why we give you like a quick introduction about what PowerShell, because some of the attackers, they say, okay, you know what, I don't really need to install more tools to discover the network. I can use whatever exists in the land or whatever exists on the system to explore more machines. So this is, they call it leaving out of the land, or leaving out of the land means I'm gonna use PowerShell or command line to figure out. And then once they have the installation done, now they go from installation to be persistence in your machine. And persisting means that they wanted really, even if you patch your system, even if you find a vulnerability, they would be able to come back to your machine and have full control over this machine. So persistence means I'm installing backdoor, I'm installing something that allows the attackers to come back. And this can be in many forms. They can manipulate the registry of your computer. They can manipulate the task manager in your computer. So it allows them always to have a backdoor to come to your machines.
Sorry.
And finally, hello?
Yeah, hi, Shadi. I just wanted to interrupt. There are some students who are using names in Arabic. So can you guys please use English? Because when I'm searching, I cannot really understand. I cannot like look for these names. Like Lena is used in English, and there's another one which I don't know, Ghala al-Maghribi, but I don't know if his name is in my
I
list.
can see Ghala, right? Ghala, can you just, if you really wanted guys to use Arabic name, can you mix it with English? So it's easy for us also to take the attendance.
But Ghala al-Arabi, which student is it? I don't know. I have this student in my list.
Ghala al-Maghribi.
No, I don't
Ghala,
have.
you don't have it in your list?
Is it
Ghala, are you
Ghaida?
in the right
Is it
room?
Ghaida?
it Ghala?
It should be Ghaida, right?
I see. No, I see Ghala.
In my list, I have Ghaida, not Ghala.
Oh, seems like Ghala was not in the right room because she disappeared now.
Or maybe it's Ghaida, but Ghaida also is Al-Harbi, not Maghrabi.
Okay, it's confusing, guys. Is Ghala or Ghaida is here?
Ghaida is here.
Okay. Yes, in Maghribi, I can see there was someone called the Ghala al-Maghribi, but the Ghala, we don't have Ghala. Yeah, I understand. There's no Ghala, but I wonder maybe she misspelled. Okay, and I have also someone written. His name is what?
Lina.
Lina. Ah, yes, Lina Khamis. Okay, perfect. Maybe our brothers. Okay, maybe. So they are confused. One of them came to my room, and someone else went to John room, or maybe to.
Always log in with English alphabets, guys. Okay, please. This is easy for me to mark the attendance. Okay, Shadi, continue, please.
Okay. Okay, so the last part of the Kelly chain, again, the Kelly chain is all about, the stages that the attacker will take to compromise the systems and have full control of the systems. And eventually he can really reach his objective, which is basically maybe a financial objective, or maybe, hacktivism, or maybe, he was there in the system for fun. So before he after he do the installation and the privilege escalation and being persistent in your system, they will do something called command and control. So in command and control, they will have a channel back, which is basically the persistent channel that allows them to control the machines and send a command from time to time to this machine. Maybe they wanted to compromise your machine to make it part of botnets. So they wanted really later on to use your machine to do crypto mining, or maybe to launch a denial of service attack or distributed denial of service attack. So this is all the action and objective that's basically maybe the attacker wanted to install a ransomware and ask you for money, or exfiltrate some of your intellectual property. So there's so many things that the attacker will do once he reaches. And the thing that we discussed last time before we leave in Wednesday specifically, we mentioned that in order for you to stop the attacker, you really need to understand these steps and try to build your defenses in each one of these steps in order to break the Kelly chain, okay? If you manage really to limit your footprint, if you really can manage your footprint in the internet, you can manage your job posting the internet, you can manage what is the name, what the attacker will see on the internet about you from Google search, then you eliminated the attacker from gleaning more information about the target. So you guys, we talked about in reconnaissance, there is passive reconnaissance, and there is an active reconnaissance, and you really need to implement protection techniques to eliminate passive reconnaissance and active reconnaissance. So this is what we talked about. And this is what we said that NIST framework, the cybersecurity framework, was good at it. Why? Because NIST will allow you to think, okay, now I need to protect myself against the reconnaissance. How can I do this? Okay, how about active reconnaissance? Okay, active reconnaissance is basically the attacker will get engaged with you by sending traffic to your computer and probe your network and probe your system to understand what is the active hosts, what is the vulnerability exists, how can we really, see if there is a well-known vulnerability in his system. So that's why also implementing the CSF will say, okay, you know what, you need, first of all, in the early beginning of CSF, if you guys remember, is a stage called identification. And if you remember, identification is all about, you need to understand your assets, you need to understand the business environment, and finally, you need to understand to do risk assessment. The risk assessment will go through, what is the threats looks like, what is the vulnerability exists in your system. So you really need to be actively scanning your systems, okay, and try to find these vulnerabilities before the bad guys will find about this vulnerability. So it gives you an idea about what vulnerability can someone from the outside world will see about you. And that's why sometimes we do something called, white ethical hacking and black hat ethical hacking, or white testing or black testing. And black testing is simulating what an adversary from outside will see about your network, and he doesn't know anything about you. So this is all will allow us to patch our system, to really install some equipment or countermeasure to prevent the attack from taking place. And that's why you can map the protection part with stopping the kill chain or breaking the kill chain. Because if you break the kill chain, the attacker will not be able to achieve his objective, will not be able to go and back and exfiltrate your system. So this is what we talked about last time. Okay, guys. And this is specifically cyber security kill chain. We talked about that in some cases we need detections technique. Why? Because detection techniques will allow you to, even if you get compromised, okay, to detect if there is something went wrong. So for example, once the attacker have already developed a weaponization, and once he delivered this weaponization to you, and once you started to exploit the system, or once he started to exploit the system, once the system is exploited, guys, it starts to give some indication that the system is not stable, the system has been compromised, and we call this IOC, which is indication of compromise. So your system started to create new processes. Your system started to create new connection to an external world, to some specific IP address. So also your system started to run, added more users to the users that exist in the machine. The system is trying to run installation using PowerShells. So all of these things, guys, can really be an indication of compromise, okay? So the indication of the compromise, it happened after the attacker managed to deliver the weapon to your systems, and now you cannot use preventive techniques to kill the supply chain. What you can do at that time to implement detection techniques, and once the detection, you find something suspicious or abnormal on an event or an incident, you start to implement the incident response. So for example, the exploitation phase, we mentioned that you can really have some techniques to protect against exploitation, okay? But in the same time, there is also some techniques to detect. And where we can find detections, the detection also exists in NIST. So over here, guys, if you remember, this is the NIST CSF. And again, what is the NIST CSF? Is basically a cybersecurity framework. What we mean by cybersecurity framework, it will allow you to have a perception about the information security program within your organization. What perception we mean? You have an overlook for everything. So everything you do, okay, within the organization, when it comes to information security, you should go and consult the framework, okay? And there is some NIST publication. It's called the NIST 800. Maybe I talked about it before, or maybe I didn't talk about it before, but the 800 series is controls, okay? It's to tell you how to secure, how to implement firewall, for example, okay? Here it's saying, you know what? In protection, you need to implement data security. And data security means you need to protect the data at rest and transit. And data at transit means the data is moving or coming from outside to inside your network. So you need to implement firewall, but it will not tell you what firewall technology exists, what firewall generation exists, how the firewall itself is working when it comes to segregation and segmentation of your network, and how to filter the traffic. So it will not tell you in details, but it will tell you, there is a reference here in the NIST framework. It will tell you, okay, you know what? If you go and check out, okay, publication code 800, okay, 41.R, which is revision number 41R1. 41 will R1 will tell you exactly how you implement firewall within the organization. Okay, so the framework tell you need to protect your data at rest, you need to protect your data at transit. We recommend this NIST 800 series to go and check it out, and then start to implement the firewall to protect your data at transit. Okay, so this is basically the NIST framework. And I said, even in the interviews right now, when someone asks me which standard you follow. So you tell them, okay, there is 2 standards you need to follow. Okay, the standard number 1, which is the CSF, because it gives you a whole idea about how you manage, you know, your information security program within the organization. And there is a specific standard, which is 800 series something, which is 800 maybe 53, 41, 800 123. There is so many standards, and every standard is covering a certain technology. So you really need both of them. So this one will give you the mentality, the CSF will give you the mentality how to look at the security within your organization, from that you need to implement 5 core functions and subcategories from these five core functions. And then the next publication, which is 800 series, it will tell you how specifically you can implement controls. Okay, guys, so far so good about this standard. Again,
yes,
this is
so far so good, yeah.
Okay, this could be, guys, a question in interview. Well, I was in an interview recently, and they asked me which standard you follow when it comes to cybersecurity. Okay, and when you explain the standard the same way that I just explained it, it means that you understand what is NIST CSF is all about, what is the 800 series is all about, and how the combination. And again, in NIST framework, guys, we have already covered the identification part in a deep details. We talked about asset discovery or asset management. We talked about cybersecurity risk and how to identify vulnerabilities, how to do risk assessment, how to do risk modeling, how to do evaluation, how to come up with a risk treatment and risk management. So this is all we have covered in the first sections. And we moved and we said, okay, as soon as we find a risk, as soon as we find the proper risk score, we start to inform the management about the risk, and then we move to the risk implementation or mitigation, which is this is why they hire you in your organization. Your main job is to mitigate the risk, is to reduce the risk to the acceptable level or to the limit of that's acceptable for the organization. And we talked about the protection part. We started with identity and access management. We looked at the IAAA, and we looked at the identity management. I explained some solution like PAM. We talked also about Radius and Takasis when it comes to really establishing identity and access management within our networks. We had the chance to talk a little bit maybe Active Directory and Kerberos and how we can implement single sign-on and identification and access management within the Windows or environment. So also, if you wanted, we can look at identity and access management on the cloud, because this is a very important. So many organizations now moving to the cloud. So you really, the first thing to secure the cloud is to establish your identity and access control system. So the identity and access control system in a very basic way, what are, who you are, okay, what can you do in the system, and how we can hold you accountable for what you do. I can show you this is later on today if we have some time, how to do it in the cloud, how to implement identity and access management in the cloud. Okay, guys? We mentioned also there is awareness and training, and this is a soft skills or managerial skills or managerial control to really educate your users, because your user could be the weakest point in your organization, or can be also the first line of defense. So if you train the users, if you give them a proper awareness, they will be able to really tell you if they notice something suspicious. At the same time, if you let them without training, without awareness, they could be clicking phishing links all the day, taking the laptop to unsecure public areas and try to connect to the internet from unsecure public networks, so his machine can be compromised. So really, education and awareness is very important. We talked about the information protection processes and procedures. We talked about proactive technology like firewall, IPS, IDSs. We looked at also next generation firewall, UTMs, and all the stuff in the lectures, okay? And I told you we will not look at the detections phase, because the detection phase, we have an entire course for how to detect the threats and how to look for anomalies within the networks and how to really identify this threat and try to mitigate it. So the detection techniques is all about, you know, if you find something that's abnormal, is breaking your normal baseline of traffic or breaking your normal procedures, you just start to do investigation and try to identify if it's real threats or no, or it's real incidents or no. And once we just escaped this very quickly. We said we're not going to talk about, and we talked about respond and recover. And in respond and recover, guys, basically, if you find an incident within your organization, how you react against this incident. And we mentioned there is a proper methodology to react for incidents, to contain the incidents, and really try to mitigate further damage to your information assets. So we talked about the incident response methodology. We talked about how important is communication and how important to have a plan beforehand before an incident take place. Okay, we talked about the analysis part. Okay, and do containment and eradication and recovery. And again, we moved from responding to recovery. And we mentioned that in recovery, we'll have so many recovery options. We call this contingency planning. And the contingency planning is important to really plan ahead for a catastrophic event or for really a disaster event, and how to really recover from an incident which is huge in impact, or how to move to a disaster recovery side in case if you cannot really, operate in the main site anymore. We talked also about certain terminology like recovery time objective, maximum tolerable time for downtime, and all this stuff. So this is all what we have covered in the last sections. Okay, and then we kind of came back here to respond, and we talked about digital forensics and how the digital forensics and responding sometimes they are going hand to hand, and they are integral process to really, if you find an incident within the organization, how you really mitigate the risk of this incident to cause more damage, and at the same time you establish and start your digital forensics process to investigate what happened exactly, try to collect evidence, and finally analyze this evidence and then showing it in the court of law and all the stuff. So this is basically what we have covered in the last maybe months. I know this is kind of a quick revision because we have talked a lot about this in details, but this is just to keep everything in your mind. And don't forget, guys, the whole idea behind cybersecurity is to mitigate the risk. So the first important part that you need to really implement here is to find out what is the risk to your organization. You will not be able to find the risk without talking to the management and understanding the assets, because you cannot really protect what you cannot visualize or whatever you cannot understand. If you don't understand the system, if you cannot visualize the topology and the design and the architect of the system, you will not be able to protect it. So this is the first early beginning here is very important. That's why, guys, there's another publication that is specifically like here, for example, in identification part, the risk assessment guys and the risk management, they give you details, but they didn't give you like really in details what is the risk life cycle looks like and what you can do in the treatment and all this. They give you just names, okay? And that's why there is another publication that exists also for NIST that is handling only, okay, risk assessment and risk management. There's also ISO publication and the standard for really handling the risk within the organization. So this is the 2005 is risk management process. It will tell you exactly how to, the guidelines, how to really assess a risk of a cybersecurity risk within the organization. But again, the NIST cybersecurity frameworks, the CSF, is the generic idea. But then under this generic idea, there is so many other publications that you can use and utilize to really conduct a risk assessment in a proper way. Okay, so in this week, I promise, and for the entire month, we'll be focusing on the detection part. And I will explain why detection part, guys, is becoming like really the thing right now. Okay, if you open LinkedIn right now, you will find so many jobs now for SOC engineers. Okay, and we talk about what is SOC engineer and what they do today. So you'll find so many jobs about SOC tier 1, SOC tier 2, SOC tier 3. We need the manager for SOC operations. Okay, so all these jobs are related to the detection of an attacks. So the SOC engineer are basically the engineer that they are trained, and that is what we're going to do in this course specifically, that we will try to train you to find an incident, okay? And we'll try to also to educate you how to respond to the incidents, okay? Because this is basically what SOC engineer will do. So the SOC engineer are good and well trained when they are when it comes to look for events and incident within the organization, and then verify if these incidents are really a real incidents and what the indication of a compromise. And then once a SOC engineer find about the incidents and he started to investigate and he found out it's an incident, he start to really move the case to the incident response team, which is they call them SOC tier 2. And once the SOC tier 2 find out the incident, they start to try to do a IR process, which is the incident response process. And once they have the incident response recover this incident, this is their job in a day-to-day basis. So, and we have also SOC tier 3, which is something called threat hunting. And the threat hunting means I have someone specifically in my organization, he is gonna be there to look for threats that is not actually like we couldn't really find by the SOC team. So how this threat hunter will do his jobs, what he gonna do to really find out about new threats that is emerging, or maybe a zero-day vulnerability within the organization, or he will go and look for a certain threats within the organization. The threat hunter will do something called threat intelligence. So they use threat intelligence sources. So they gather information, they collect this information, they analyze this information, and they go back and they start to look for these indication of threats within the organization. Once they found one of these threats, they will call the defending team to really mitigate these threats. So this is a full cycle, okay? So I will protect as much as I can, okay? But if the attacker managed to really compromise my system, and I will explain why, even with all these protection techniques, guys, we still have some compromises happening. And part of it, because the environment that we work at, the environment of risk is changing, okay? And the environment of business has changed a lot since few years. So we are more relying now in the cloud technology. We are more relying now in BOD, which is bring your own device. We are more relying now at working from home. So we have computers outside our organization that are basically working from home. So there is no much defenses there at home. So that's exactly why we see a lot of threats, a lot of risks are really compromising machines now. So we need to do some threat intelligence. We can look at the new threats. We give it to the threat hunters. The threat hunters will look for these threats within the organization or within the cloud or within the organization desktop and machines. And once they found one of these threats, they try to mitigate it before, again, the attacker will be able to compromise. So again, what we try to do with the detection is we really try to really avoid that the attacker would manage to achieve his objective. And this is part of killing or breaking the kill chain. So detection is becoming a thing right now, and more investment, what I have seen in the last few years is really moving toward detection techniques. Because the prevention techniques, you need it. No, there is no doubts about it. You need to have a firewall. You need to have a next generation firewall. You need to have a web filtering firewall. You need to protect your identity and access management. There is no talk about this, because if you just really don't do one of these things, it will be compromised 100%. But now we are not talking about being compromised. We're talking about the adversary is really advanced, and he can really manage to bypass all this. He can manage to bypass your firewall, your web application firewall. He managed to bypass your identity and access management. Now, at least I will have the second line of defense. And the second line of defense is detection techniques. So what we're gonna look at the detection techniques here, guys, if you allow me. So I'll just go ahead and look at the anomalies, okay? So we're gonna teach you any anomaly must be promptly identified so the potential impact can be understood immediately. So once you find anomaly, and we'll try to explain anomaly later on, anomaly, anything that's not normal or above what you can really handle, okay? Like for example, I will just give you an example. Let's say that you have a web server over here, okay? And there is only port 443 is open, so you're expecting to see HTTPS traffic, okay, coming from your firewall to your server and then going to the external outside, okay? And all of a sudden, so this is normal traffic. Why? Because you have an HTTP server here. Okay, what will be anomaly here? Okay, if you find that a traffic here, an ISMB traffic is going between you and the external world, okay? Or maybe you find an FTP traffic, which is secure FTP traffic, so encrypted traffic coming from your machines going to the external world. This is abnormal. This is anomaly. Okay, you need to investigate this because this is basically an indication of compromise. Okay, why someone using FTP? Because sometimes the attacker, they use FTP or maybe ISMB tunnels or maybe DNS tunnels to exfiltrate data outside their organization. So how would you know the anomaly from the normal traffic? So this is, you need first to understand what is normal behavior, and this is then you can find the anomaly behavior. And what he's saying here, once you find anomaly, you must be promptly identify and actually try to mitigate or try to respond before it's really cause a lot of damage and a lot of harm. So this is the first thing. Where is this guys coming from? The first one coming from this specifically, okay? And it's not tell you here in the CSF how you manage to find anomalies. Then you have to go to a technical guidelines from NIST, like 800-123, to look at how to implement SIEM solution, how to implement data logs and all this stuff. Okay, guys? And then you have to also, in order to achieve detection within your organization, you need to be able to continuously monitoring. And here, this one is over here, it's mapped here. The continuously monitoring means all your assets and system must be continuously monitored, okay? That means that your monitor is 24/7, okay? Yani in most of the time that you are gonna work as they say, a SOC engineer, the SOC engineer guys are not taking 12-hour shift or 8 hours work and stuff. They work in schedule, and every schedule they need to cover 24/7. Why? Because they wanted to be around the system 24/7, especially the SIEM solution, especially the SOC. So what they do, they work 3 days a week and they take 4 days off, okay? Or sometimes the vice versa. They work 4 days and they take 3 days off. But again, in these 3 days, okay, they will work 12 hours, so a total of 36 hours, and then you will take 4 days off. So it's really good, but in there also, it's intense because these 3 days, you will be completely just working. You wake up in the morning, 9 o'clock, from 9 to 9 p.m., are sitting and investigating cases, looking at traffic and incidents, but then the reward is great also because you have 4 days off. That's why when you see a SOC basically jobs coming outside, they will say, okay, it's gonna be shifts kind of job, and the shifts mean that you're gonna be working in a shift of 12 hours or maybe 10 hours a day for 4 days or 3 days a week. So this is continuously monitoring. And why we said that what we are gonna monitor is basically any IT system, any important assets within the organization. So if you are really, for example, having a firewall, and this firewall is all the traffic is going through the firewall, so you will be monitoring the firewall. If you have a server here, which is a HTTP server or HTTPS server, which is you are hosting your website on top of it, you will be monitoring this. So any important assets, your Active Directory environment, your, for example, DNS server, your very important file server within the organization, even computers, machines within the organization, especially users, okay, you will be also monitoring this stuff, and it should be continuously, okay? And this is when we have 24/7 for all the assets, it will help us to identify events quickly, and secure initiative. So I think we have already talked about what is events and incidents. And the events doesn't mean you really mean it's an incident. So I think what he meant here in this specific section, that we are looking at to identify incidents, not events, because there is so many events happening in our network. We cannot really identify all the events. We can just look for the incident and try to look at the incident that really can harm our organization and try to quickly to do this. And this is actually part of being proactive. Means what? Proactive. What is the difference between reactive and proactive measurements? Okay, so proactive means you are not waiting for the attacker to compromise a system. You really wanted to see any suspicious behavior and act quickly to stop these attacks. Okay, so before he can compromise or exfiltrate data, once you find an indication of compromise, you act promptly and stop this attack. So this is being proactive. There's some measure called reactive. Reactive, for example, incident response are reactive. Okay, reactive, why? Because you wait for the incident to happen and then you react. Part of being proactive is you look for threats within your organization. And once you find the threats within your network, you start to proactively try to eliminate this specifically threat. Okay, guys, and that's what we will talk about, inshallah, today. Yes, exactly. Reactive is after the session. Proactively means, yes, reactive after the session happened, after the incidents happened, then you are doing, you are trying to, for example, you're trying to containment for this incidents and try to eradicate the threats and trying to recover from the incident. But proactively means you are looking for a threats as soon as it takes place to eliminate these threats. Okay. Another thing here, guys, the detection process. So we have a detection process. There should be a specific way to detect and track events through function like detection logs and event alerts. These should be set up to adapt and evolve as the threats landscape is changed over the time. So now what he's saying, we're telling you guys, you need to have a detection process. What we do in order to detect any threats within the organization or any incident within the organization, maybe we'll implement something called SIM solution. We talked about SIM solution before, and an easy way, SIM solution is a centralized place where you able to really add all your data or all your events or logs to one centralized place. Why? Because you wanted to have the full picture. Okay, why I wanted to have the full picture? Because as I mentioned before, when we talked about logs, if you have 10,000 systems within your organization, and then this 10,000 systems are creating security logs, imagine how much effort you need to go to 10,000 different systems to really look at the security logs. It's gonna take you forever, and you will never be able to see the big pictures. Why? Because you're looking for an individual systems at a time, okay? So it will not give you really a great insight and a great vision for what is going on inside the organization. So what can you do in order really to have a full vision and correlation? And I'll explain what is correlation in 1 second. But again, how can I really see all the data? So the early beginning of SIM, before the SIM solution emerged, and there is now a new solution called SOAR, but I'm just gonna tell you the early beginning. The early beginnings, they had something called syslog. So the syslog system, which is very old-fashioned system, it's only about just collecting this log in a centralized place. So now we are getting the logs from maybe a Cisco router, from a Windows system, from a Linux system, and we add this to a centralized place or to a certain database. And we do something called parsing. So what is really parsing? Because they always say when you have a SIM system, you need to collect and parse this data. And parsing means, guys, to really format the data in a way that's easy for you to read. It's readable for you. Means it will tell you the source IP address is wherever, the destination IP address is whatever. Okay, now that the protocol has been used is this protocol, you know, the event time is this time, and it will do this for every single event. So now you have a centralized location, okay, guys, with all these events with all these data is in one location. And this is what called syslog. The syslog was the early granddad of SIM solution that we see here. So this is back in maybe, I think when I started my job, maybe 15 years ago, the syslog was a thing at that time. SIM solution was not really even there. I'll tell you when SIM solution started to emerge. So the syslog was a place to look for logs, to troubleshoot also, because you have one router is down, so you can go to the log here, understand what's happening exactly, and start to understand why this router was down. For example, a network switch maybe started to have one word disabled and enabled. So maybe there is something called like a spanning tree or something wrong with this switch. You can see the data here in the syslog. But then when the focus of us moved from just a database that contains all the data to a database that helps you to identify incidents, we move to SIM. And the SIM solution is basically also database, but the database is going to also collect the data and also organize the data, parse the data in a certain way. And the most important thing that I see in the SIMs is correlate the data. What we mean by correlation here is to find a linkage between certain events in your network. For example, you have someone, okay, tried to log in 10 times, okay? And this IP also tried to scan your network 5 minutes ago. And this IP specifically address is recognized as not really good an IP address because it has a bad reputation. So SIM can really, because of all this information, it can link it. So they said they have an IP address coming from Russia, which is a country we don't have anyone working there. This basically, yes, exactly. So exactly as I'm saying. So with all this correlation together, we can tell this is a definitely incident. So we don't have any employees working there. We have this guy was trying multiple times to access a system or to access a network device. And then finally he successfully. So this is all an indication there's something suspicious happening. How to correlate between this all events? You create some rules within the SIM. We'll talk about rules later on when we look into the SIM solution in more details. But that I just wanted to tell you, this is what happened in the SIM, and the SIM started to emerge in 2012. This is the first time I saw a SIM in my life, and basically the company that's the first early company that started the SIM solution was RSA. Okay, so RSA Fusion was the early beginning of the SIM solution, and this is where you see some logs, and some logs are correlated, and you can create your own rules. You're saying, okay, if someone is sending sync ACK or sync sweep to your network, I should know about it. So you really need to know about it. You can create a rules within the SIM. And once, if your firewall has already been hit by sync scan, it can tell you this is the IP address from the sync scan. It was trying to do so and so and so and so. Okay, so this is the second generation. Now in 2020, we've seen the new generation of SIM. It's evolving a little bit. It's called source solution. And the source solution is basically, it adds another layer of business analytic and intelligence to your SIM to allow you to automate the response. Okay, it will not give you a full automation. It will take you a lot to do a full automation, but it will allow you to do an automation for your response. So you find an incident. Okay, if I found this incident, what should I do? Should I always isolate this device? Okay, should I segment this area of the network? Should I, cut the board or disable the board? Should I disable the user until you come and really investigate these issues? How you program this? This is called the playbook or the program book. So you can program according to the incidents and how do you see this incident. So this is also important because you cannot really have enough human capability to really look into every incident and take a proper response. This is one thing. The other thing that you really need to understand, the SOC team is going to be 24/7 monitoring the network, but the incident response team, they're going to work in schedules. So you maybe have one incident response guy at that schedule, for the next 12 hours, but you have 2 incidents, okay? So they try to find a solution to automate the response. So this is basically all the generation of started from syslog to SIM solution to SOAR solutions. Okay, guys, and again, SOAR now is becoming a big thing right now. If you go and take a training in SOAR solution, I can guarantee that you find a job within like 1 month. Okay, guys. So this is what we are here right now in the detection phase. So far, so good. Any questions?
Yes, so far, so good. Yeah.
Okay. So where we are when it comes to security controls, because this is basically, okay, so only I'm saying it's good in Nasiba. How about the rest? The rest is taking rest. Okay, Tagreed is saying clear. Okay, Abdulaziz. Okay, good. So where we are right now, when we studied before early beginning that our security control function types, what kind of security control function? And they said, again, where is the security controls coming from? The security controls coming from after you communicate the risk to the management, and the management already decided to reduce the risk or mitigate the risk. You should implement your basically controls. And we mentioned there is so many type of controls. There is management controls, there is physical controls, there is technical controls, and you should implement defense in depth. And we talked about defense in depth maybe last week, and I gave you a quick example. If you have a castles and you wanted really to protect these castles, you need to implement layers of security within these castles, starting with your policies and procedures, and then you know, the physical security. Then after the physical security, network security, and so on and so forth. We talked about the defense in depth, and I told you it's important to bring defense in depth in an interview, because this is what they wanted to really hear about. And if you look for a simple definition of defense in depth, it's basically you building layers or overlapping layers of protection. So if one layer failed to protect you, there is another layers to protect against the attacks. And for sure, it starts with the, you know, the policy, the intent of management to protect the system, the procedures. It's written in documents step by step how to implement security, and then you jump to the physical security, how you really prevent an attackers to get to your network, and this is where it's getting interesting. So we mentioned that even in order to, there is a category, a whole category called physical controls, but the physical control itself is divided to many subcategories. So some of these categories are preventive, some of these categories are basically detective controls, and some of them are corrective controls. Okay, guys? So even in physical controls is divided to this all 3 areas. Preventive control, detective controls, and corrective controls. And we give an example of a castle, and this castle you need to prevent an intruder to get into it. So you started to build a moat or a lake around it, started to clean the grass area. You have some securities are watching, so if they're detecting anything abnormal, they will alarm everyone within these castles. And we have corrective controls, and these corrective controls, maybe they call more guards to come and defend the castles and so on and so forth. And there's also network, okay? And we have application, we have computers, we have hardware. And the network also, we mentioned that you really need to have preventive control, detective controls, and corrective controls. So basically, what we are covering today, okay, which is specifically about threats and detections and incidents, is falling into the detective area. So the detective area is a control, may not prevent or deter access, but it will identify and record any attempt or successful intrusions. Okay, and that's why, if you remember again, where we are right now from the cybersecurity, the kill chain, we are in the exploitation, because once you exploited the system, you started to really create some logs within the system and within the network that can really, if we are really giving a lot of attention, we can detect and then respond to it. So I just wanted you guys to connect all these parts together when you are talking about cybersecurity. Okay, So why detection is important? And that is what I promised you to explain. And here, look at this. Advanced target attacks, which is some people are called it advanced persistent threats, APTs. Yani we have now groups in the world, they are nation funded, they are very well organized, they have capabilities, they have the intention, and they have the resources to attack you. Okay, so this is basically something very, very hard to defend against. Okay, so they will manage to breach your system. Okay, so what can we do as a defender now? Can we sit and watch our system to be hacked left and right? No, we need really to have teams, okay, to really detect these attacks and respond to these attacks. So here, guys, it's saying that the advanced target attacks make prevention-centric strategy obsolete, okay? And I'll explain what is the centric strategy obsolete, okay? Securing enterprise in 2020 will require a shift to information and people-centric security strategy combined with pervasive internal monitoring and sharing of security intelligence. Okay, what he's trying to say in this, they're saying our work environment now, guys, is different. Why it's different? We used to have a one data center room, and this is where we start to implement security and layer of security, and this is what is called prevention-centric technology. So this is the prevention techniques or prevention controls. Okay, now our data is some of this data in the cloud. Okay, so now part of your data is here. Okay, you can implement also prevention in the cloud. You can implement identity and access management. You can implement firewalls and everything. Okay, but the data in the cloud. Okay, how do you know that someone from within the cloud is not spying on you? How do you know that your neighbor in the hardware, someone who is visualized with you within the same hardware is not spying on you? Okay, because prevention techniques mean that you are gonna prevent someone to access your instance in the cloud, or maybe the firewall will filter the traffic to the cloud. But how can I really detect an attack that's happened into within the environment here? Okay, that's why it's also another thing that you need to do. Okay, our companies before we have our user are sitting here like a good users accessing our computers over here. Okay, but what happened is, okay, they have all the laptop or desktop connected to the server, so I can really secure this data. Okay, but what if this guy went home and started to work from home? How can I really monitor what he's doing in home? Can I really stop him to download something in his computer? Can I stop him to open his personal email and look at phishing emails, or someone can manage to really take advantage using a social engineer? How can I detect this even if the user is away? Okay, so that's what he means by obsolete. Obsolete means here it's not gonna, we don't have to like really throw it in the garbage and never use it again. It means only prevention technology is not gonna work. We need to combine with prevention technology. We need to really combine with it pervasive internal monitoring and sharing of security intelligence. And I will talk about security intelligence in a very brief way later on when we take some rest. But for now, I just wanted to tell you guys that in 2020, because the cloud computing, because the working from home, okay, because we are more relying on wireless technology than we ever, we need really not only to rely on preventive, we need also detective control to be combined with. And also what prove this fact over here and prove that you see a lot of SOC engineers are required, and a lot of people are really taking a training of how to use QRadar, how to use Splunk, how to use source systems, and all this stuff. Let's see if you read here. This is a Gartner, which is one very well-known research centers, especially about technology. So by 2020, 60% of enterprise information security budget will be allocated, okay, for rapid detections and response approach up from less than 10% in 2013. So again, what he is saying here, in 2013, if we draw a line of time, 2013, guys, in 2013, we have basically, let's say $1 million allocated for your budget, okay, as an IT security. You will use only out of this 1 million, you will use 100,000 for your budget here for the detection technique and responding. Now by 2020, okay, we are in 2022 now, but in 2020, this budget, it will reach up to 600,000. It's going to be allocated out of all the money coming from IT security. Like, so we will give you another million, you will allocate 600,000 for detection and response. And that's why companies right now are implementing, Splunk, QRadar, SIM solution. They're hiring SIM teams that work in 24/7. So they're spending a lot of money in detection. Why? Because that is how they perceive the market and how the market prevents. They said, yes, you need firewalls, you need identity and access management, you need all this preventive controls, but combined with these preventive controls, we need also detection control. And that's why there's a whole course that we're gonna take in 2-3 weeks now. It's all about detection, and it all is covering this detecting part of NIST cybersecurity. Okay, guys, again, here is the challenges part that has already evolved in the very few years that allow us, we really need detection techniques, because we have users are basically Splunk analysis, the threats, I use it. Okay, so Naif is saying he's used Splunk for threats analysis. There is so many solution over there that you can use for threats analysis and threat incident analysis. Splunk is one of them. QRadar is one of them. Micro Focus, they have also one. There's also Elasticsearch. There's 10, I think right now, if you looked at how many SIM solution we have, at least you'll find 12 or 15 ones. Okay, so what is the challenge that happened recently that made us, we must do detections? That there is change in the landscape of current challenges, okay? So factors that could expose an organization for new security threats is changing. So for example, bring your own device. It's open the door if your device is infected by a virus or infected by a malware or spyware. It would be part of the network of this company, and it will also has some email data or some files from the company. So this is also opening the door for threats. So it's important. And how can you install antivirus in the device of someone who bringing to the system? But at least you can implement detection controls that a certain IP address which is coming from this phone are trying to send malicious code to other servers within the network. So this will help you. Remote working policies, especially with the COVID-19, you allowed a lot of users to stay at home with laptops. You give them some permission to do their work at home. So this some permission, we are not protected by the firewall of our organization anymore. We're not protected by the IPS and next generation firewall. So this has also opened the door for more compromised laptops. There's so many cases. I cannot really tell you how many cases. This is now becoming the favorite way for an attacker to compromise a company is to go after one of the employees and compromise his machine. And as soon as the guy connect back to his network, they will be able to compromise the rest of the network. So this is one of their favorites right now. Wireless LAN technology, we talked about wireless before. Cloud computing, your data and your servers is in the cloud. How you can implement preventive technique, but how can you really see the traffic within the cloud? Or how can you detect something is maliciously happen? So you need to detect this incidents over the cloud, greater collaboration and data sharing, which is meaning that we are already connected to everyone in the world all the time. Okay, guys. Today we look at something called threats management and threats intelligence and threat hunting. Okay, so today is going to be about threats, and we talk about threats. Why? Because in detections, the most important thing is to really find the threats, to understand the mentality of the threats, to understand what is their motive, to understand what is their capability, what is he gonna do in the network, what is their objective. If you can understand all this about threats and you can gather information about these threats, you can better mitigate against the threats. So we will talk about threats, we'll talk about their tactics, techniques and procedures, how they really attack your network. We will talk about what is their motive. Sometimes it's political, sometimes it's financial. We'll talk about what we mean by threat intelligence and why threat intelligence now become part of your SOC team and your detection teams, and how threat intelligence will help you to protect your company or mitigate the risk in a much better ways. And then we'll talk about finally the indication of indication of compromise. So just we take a little break. We have already covered most of the stuff that we studied before. We added to them why we need threat hunting and threat detection techniques by these 2 slides. And when we come back, we look at the threats and how we simplify the idea behind threat hunting and threat intelligence, because this is an important. You can be in an interview right now and they ask you about what is the threat hunting is all about, what is the threat intelligence, okay, what sources of threat intelligence exist out there, what is the process or methodology that we use to gather information about the threats. So this is all we're gonna inshallah cover when we come back from the break. I think it's a time for break is good because I'm getting also, you know, some headache from talking. So it's good to
yes,
get
we
some
need
break.
A break for a big cup of coffee.
Okay, I know that you guys say that I'm very talkative. My wife was also saying that I'm not talkative at all, but I said my life is all talks. I talk all the time. So when
mashallah, but intelligent talk.
Alhamdulillah. So
Alhamdulillah.
my wife said, why you don't talk? I said, this is my job. I talk all day. So I don't really have energy to talk at night. So yes, we're gonna get inshallah 15 minutes break. This is 15 minutes. We'll come back inshallah 10:35. Would it be okay? 10:33.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Shadi.
Okay, guys. See you guys in a bit.